Hello and welcome. Yesterday, two debates were held in the European Parliament which boiled down to stigmatizing Central European countries. This time, Poland again, Hungary again, and also Slovenia. Those countries were targeted. The debates concerned two issues, namely the regulation of the media market in these countries and the opposition of the citizens of these countries to the ideological offensive of the radical left on LGBTIQ+ issues. Poland has been accused of having its authorities label cities as LGBT-free zones, which is obviously a lie.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Mr. Orban, no ideology justifies placing plaques in different languages that promote discrimination against sexual minorities.
This MEP member of European Parliament, who for her extreme incompetence receives tens of thousands of euros a month from our taxes, is so interested in the situation in Poland that she even doesn't know that the signs hung on the city's turnpikes are fake, that there are no LGBT-free zones in Poland, and that the only place where such zones exist is in the head of the rainbow activist Bart Staszewski, who hangs photographs and sends them around the world and then complains that the municipalities he slanders sue him.
In Poland, the activists who documented the adoption of anti-LGBTIQ resolutions by local authorities are prosecuted with the support of the ultra-conservative organization Ordo Iuris.
According to this MEP, the preparation of lies and the forging of signs that make these lies credible is a documentation. And it is beyond the MEP comprehension that municipalities and towns that have been slandered in this way have the right to demand a correction and an apology in court. During the debate, the European left, which is represented in all parliamentary groups, brought out the biggest guns against Poland, Hungary and Slovenia in connection with the media system reforms carried out in these countries. In the opinion of the European mainstream, the countries of Central Europe are running media critical of their governments.
In Slovenia, you see the Prime Minister busy with personal attacks on journalists, not just local, but also Brussels journalists, and launching an attack against the press agency. In Slovakia, actually, my country, this was also the case before the murder of Jan Kuciak, so I remember it very well. And it was also mentioned Poland, that the new tax law, and it just so happens that the tax law targets those media outlets which dare to be critical of the government. And then, obviously, you have Hungary, where the media landscape has been almost completely ruined.
But as Tom van der Wisch claims, another MEP, no one raised questions of threatening journalists in countries that comply with European Union mainstream policies.
Voorzitter, collega's, toen Guy
Verhofstadt was the Prime Minister in Belgium, journalists were systematically threatened, as some, among them one of the main editors. There was an enormous pressure for conformity under that government, and there's also a dominance in France as well. It's a kind of party and regime press.
In all of these countries, the election results, which are not questioned by anyone, for example, Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, show the confidence of voters in politicians who very often win elections against the dominant media advantage of their opponents. And the changes criticized by MEPs, for example, in Poland, the media bills changes, are based on the proposals of the European Commission itself, as former Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło said.
Media freedom, freedom of expression, this is all enshrined in the Polish constitution. The Polish media functions on the basis of our press law and other forms of legislation about media. And thirdly, There is a draft bill being discussed in Poland. It's just at the first stage of legislation. And they're speaking about this new advertising tax, but that is a proposal from the EU from 2018. And this rule is focused on the large digital companies who don't pay any taxes in Poland, in contrast to the media, which is active in Poland and pay their taxes in Poland.
In Slovenia, according to Slovenian MEPs, the vast majority of the media are against the ruling party.
The Slovenian opposition has been using this discussion to actually undermine our government. The recent research has shown that 80% of media in Slovenia are leftist and are against the government. But the government is really not limiting anyone. During the crisis, journalists have received more state aid.
According to another member of European Parliament, Nicholas Bay, far more devastating practices take place in Germany and France, not Poland, Slovenia or Hungary.
Your accusations, as usual, are grotesque and politicized. It seems you don't care about the attacks on democratic pluralism from Angela Merkel that tried to put under police surveillance the first opposition party in the country, Alternative for Deutschland.
In fact, the whole dispute is about something completely different. In many EU countries, especially in Central Europe, elections are won by conservative parties whose point of view is fundamentally different from the vision of the European left. In these countries, the dominant part of the media presents liberal left worldview. All attempts to create a media balance, including, for example, the creation of media with a conservative worldview, result in attacks on the media themselves and journalists, of course. Such attacks also took place yesterday in the European Parliament. Here are the words of the former head of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who compared conservative journalists, with whom he does not agree, to the collaborators of Adolf Hitler.
The actual leader of Poland, Mr. Kaczynski, has said that he will create Budapest in Warsaw. And he's sticking to that plan also in the media sphere. Public media have now become a Goebbelsian instrument of Europhobia and of attacking the opposition.
The discussion in the European Parliament takes absurd forms. Here is a German MEP complaining that the largest Polish company bought a chain of newspapers which is a monopolist on the Polish market. But this company bought it from a German company that used to have and own the same monopoly.
They took control of 24 regional media outlets. Polska Press was taken over by a state-owned oil company.
But this MEP didn't raise this issue when the Germans had the monopoly on the Polish newspaper market. Certainly, none of these debates are about LGBT rights or free media. Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, and no other country in the EU differentiates between citizens on the basis of sexual preference. It is also not about freedom of media, which is not restricted in the EU countries. It is only about control. For EU technocrats, the issues of sexual minorities, abortion, and media regulations have only one goal: to increase the control of EU institutions over the member states so that the EU and not the citizens of the member states will have the final say.
We have to capture the cases of the mergers of the media at the national level, which go against the freedom of expression and freedom of media.
By this logic, ultimate media freedom in Europe will only be achieved when the Eurocrats themselves control their own TV and their own media.
I propose a solution at the EU level: the creation of a European public broadcasting and news service which is independent from both national governments and advertising revenues financed by the European taxpayer, and which is EU-wide, which all member states are obliged to operate.
Obliged. However, this situation will not satisfy EU politicians either. It will only become so when all alternative media and information sources are shut down and silenced. And this is what we are going to talk about on this show. My name is Michał Rachoń, this is Rak, and we are rolling. And to talk with us on that is our first guest, German politician and lawyer, member of the European Parliament of the AfD party, Dr. Maximilian Krah. Welcome to Rak.
Hello.
Doctor, we are after two discussions in the European Parliament, both regarding mainly Central Eastern Europe, but in general, it seems to me that those were the debates about the state of the Union itself. One of them was about the LGBT movement and the LGBT-free zone, the Europe declared as such. The second one was on the media agenda in the Central Europe, but it seems to me that this discussion was more about trying to put some kind of political pressure on countries and political groups that do not comply with the mainstream European policy. What's your take on the discussions that we were witnessing in the European Parliament in the last days?
I mean, your impression is fully right. Having debates on especially Poland and Hungary and attacking the governments there, it's a running gag here in the Parliament. So we have it every month. Concerning Poland, usually the Polish opposition is using the forum they have here to attack the Polish government at home and attacking them for almost everything. And usually they say there is no freedom of press and freedom of expression in Poland. And the other issue is LGBTQIA+++. But they don't mean by it that people who are gay, etc., that they can have a decent life in Poland. They mean that Poland is not willing to accept the ideology that there are not no two sexes but 53 genders, and that you don't have toilets for men and women, but you have to have 3 toilets, etc. So that Poland is not participating in that nonsense which is now spreading across Western Europe.
Dr. Krah, but when we are hearing those debates and when we are watching it, it seems to me that all the time, each time we are discussing those issues, the main differences in the European policy come out very often from the politicians of AfD. For example, the differences on the migration policy, the differences on attitude towards the future of the European Union as a common country or a conglomerate of sovereign countries. Isn't it just a discussion about the different visions of Europe as such between different political groups in Europe?
I mean, you can even paint an even bigger picture. You can say it is a cultural clash. On the one hand, you have those who believe in the nation states and in free citizens who form one nation that has a country that is based on families, and the family is based on mommy, daddy, bambini. And on the other hand, you have those who believe there is only mankind and everyone is an individual and everyone can live wherever he or she wants, and that every traditional institution, be it family, be it nation, be it faith, is a threat to individual liberty and individual freedom. And that is the clash, and both Poland and Hungary are the forerunners of those who stick to traditional values and to the idea that we create Europe out of several nations, that a nation is based on families, that a family is based on mommy, daddy, and children. And the left here, and the liberal left, is not willing to accept other opinions than their own. And so it's very hateful. And unfortunately, we import Polish interior politics into the European Parliament because the most hateful are your own Polish opposition in Warsaw. They use the opportunity they have here to attack not only the Polish government, but the country itself.
This is actually something that we heard also from the Slovenian politicians last days. It is a similar case right now in Slovenia. Slovenia joined the group of the usual suspects, which is Hungary and Poland, as you mentioned. But there is also another issue, the issue of the ideology and the differences between the political groups in Europe. One of the members of European Parliament mentioned that there is some kind of difficulty in understanding discussion about the media landscape in Hungary, in Slovenia, in Poland, and in the same time, it seems that we have a problem with the media culture in the Western Europe, the old Europe itself. There is a problem with the political correctness in France. There is a problem with the political correctness in Germany in a way. Well, your party is being a subject of the investigation, as we heard, officially from the German authorities. So what is the problem? What is the nature of this problem, in your opinion?
The nature is that the liberal left gets back to totalitarian roots. So they say, we are pro-human rights, we are pro-humanity. That means that everyone who is contrary to our opinions and who stick to patriotism, faith, and family is against human rights, against humanity. So they do, out of a dispute of several or different opinions, they make a dispute between the good and the evil. And when you are on the evil side, then they say you have no rights on getting heard in TV. You don't have rights to come into TV talk shows. And for example, if you look to Germany, we have statistics on how many members of our party, members of parliament, members of European Parliament, are invited to the big TV talk shows we have. And the point is, we are the biggest opposition party, but they don't invite us to the talk shows in the state TV. Or another issue, we are the biggest opposition party, but we don't have a vice chairman of the national parliament. I mean, imagine the PO in Poland would not get the position of the vice same marshal. That would be a scandal, and the European Parliament would debate it and would attack Poland for it. So the point is, the left says, we are the good ones, and because we are the good ones, we have the right to discriminate the traditional ones. And then they say, everyone who is not doing it like us is discriminating us on the other side. So we have double standards. And from my personal impression, I know Poland a little bit, I know Hungary, at the spectrum of allowed opinions, the variety of media offers you have, is much wider, and the climate is much more liberal in Warsaw and in Budapest than it is in today's Berlin, Brussels, or Munich. And what we have to understand is that they make out of a dispute of opinions, they make a dispute between good and evil and claim to be the good ones. It's very dangerous to make political questions moral questions.
Dr. Maximilian Krah was our guest on Rack On. Doctor, I hope to see you next time, and thank you for your time and your presence on our show.
And I thank you and wish you a good day in Warsaw.
Thank you very much. And after those discussions in the European Parliament, Angel Dzhambazki, Bulgarian politician and lawyer, member of the European Parliament for VIMRO and chairman of the VIMRO delegation to ECR Group. Hello, Angel. Nice to have you on Rack On.
Hello, dzień dobry. I'm very glad to be with you.
What's your take on the discussion that we are witnessing in the European Parliament? Hungary, Poland, as usual, but Slovenia as well. Very often, Bulgaria also are the countries, and generally the countries from the Central Europe are very often framed as the European Union enemies right now. What's your take on the discussion about the LGBT stuff and the media stuff in Central Europe right now?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And second, let me be very frank. Whole title of this debate is a fake news. Fake at all. Because our colleagues in European Parliament, they want to fight with so-called LGBTIQ, etc., free zones in Poland, but these zones basically does not exist. So this is fake at whole. In the beginning, they're fake. So our far left friends in European Union, they use the chamber to produce fake news against Poland, against Hungary, against Slovakia, as you said, and against Bulgaria, based on fake news. They seek for an enemy within the gates. And this is very pity from my point of view, because we face a lot of problems now, right now, a lot of troubles right now, and they are addressing non-existing issues as LGBTI free zones in Poland are. All we know that there is no such issue in Poland. This is something produced by guy, LGBT activist called, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was LGBT activist Bart Starzewski.
Yeah, that's correct. And the question that I have, because this is what we are familiar with in Poland, because we know it very well, when we hear part of the members of the European Parliament, some of them are aware of this fact, as you are, but some of them are claiming that, that those fake news provocations actually are real issues. In your opinion, the socialist members of European Parliament are aware of the fact that we are talking about the fake news, or no? Do they lie on purpose, or do they lie because they are not aware of what is the real situation?
For sure, they lie on purpose. Not only socialist members, Greens, communists, all of them. There is, unfortunately, there are people originally from Poland, part of this big coalition established for the European elections. Part of them are, let's say, they declare themselves as part of right wing, etc., etc. All of them lie on purpose. They know exactly, they know for sure this is a lie. This is a real lie, and there is no such issue as LGBTIQ. I don't know all the letters there. I can remember them because they produce a letter on daily basis. So they lie because they want to blame Polish government because Polish government is following, let's say, much more traditional, conservative, Christian way of, let's say, of life. So they lie on purpose. There is no doubt.
So what is the political problem that the European mainstream has with the conservative governments in Poland, in Slovenia, in Hungary, in other countries? What is the case? Well, there were some conservative governments in many countries in Europe, but we haven't seen things like this in the past.
Their main problem is that in Poland, basically, Poland is maybe the, let's say, most important European country with, let's say, traditional family values, defending traditional family values. And these guys are very strong against these family values, against our way. We want just to keep our way of life, our society, our family, and they want to force us to accept under the because they move far left propaganda. They move.
Do they need it? What do they need it for? The European mainstream seems to be far left, as you just mentioned. But my question is, Why do they need this far-left propaganda to do what? To push the agenda of the new European Union as a one big country with no borders and with the homogenic societies, no matter which nations we are members of?
Well, they will try to let's say to move European Union, as you said, in one not country. They don't believe in countries. One area, one space full of just atomic persons. They are Marxists, far left Marxists. They believe in Karl Marx legacy, in Soviet Union legacy. It's strange, very ironic, but these people are Marxists and let's say Soviet Union followers. They want to destroy every country, every nation, and that's why we are their enemies. They recognize as their enemies because they want to have a society based on just person without family, without identity, without a religion, without pole, without sex, without gender, I don't know. They want to create a space full of, let's say, consumers. I believe so. It's visible.
Well, the people who had a chance or maybe a bad luck of living under the real communist regime and the Soviet Union regime, which the Central European countries were, seems to have some different opinions on this. And I think that it might be one of the reasons for different views of the people and the political parties and the politicians from the Central Europe. Do you agree with that?
Fully. I was born in 1979. I remember what communism was. I remember what Soviet Union was. I remember what Marxist agenda was. So I know what they want to reborn now here in Europe. We believe in our strong countries. We believe in our national sovereign states. I believe that Poland as a let's say, major Central European country should have the right to determine, to decide how to rule and how to run and how to govern its own country. So if Polish people are capable to vote for example, law and justice, so be it. And this is what are our friends from the far left against. They don't like us because they want to have society without society cells. They want to have society without families. They believe in self-sex marriage, LGBTIQ, etc., etc., etc. As I said, propaganda. They believe that they are capable to force us to, let's say, adore them. No, this is not the case. We believe in our countries. We believe in our families. Yes, I'm listening.
Angel, thank you very much for your time and for your presence. I hope that we are going to have another chance to talk on the next occasions on the discussions in European Parliament. Thank you for your time.
For sure. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję bardzo. As we are talking about the far-left agenda on the political scene in Europe, we do have the same kind of things that we are witnessing in the United States right now. The far-left seems to be in a full sprint right now on the other side of the ocean. And to talk about it, with us is Dr. Jake Jacobs, history instructor. Hello, nice to have you on Rack On.
Hello, Michael.
You are an author of several books on the history of the United States, the history of conservatism as well. What's your take on this far left offensive that we are seeing all over the Western civilization right now? We are in the first phase of the 21st century. We seem to forget what was the real nature of the communism while the Soviet Union collapsed. But this ideology didn't go down with history. It seems to be, as I mentioned, in a full sprint attacking all over the Western civilization. Why?
To quote Abraham Lincoln, we have forgotten God in America. I can still remember in June of 1979 when 1 million people were at Victory Square in Warsaw. And what did the Polish patriots cry out? We want God, we want God, we want God. And what's happened in America, we have forgotten God. We have forgotten that this is a constitutional republic under God. And the hardcore left in America, whether it be Antifa, Black Lives Matter, radical groups like Democratic Socialists of America, in essence, want to just take God out of American culture. Remember, when President Trump was in Warsaw in July of 2017, he gave a wonderful speech. There's an amazing, inextricable relationship between the United States and Poland. You're a people who have suffered, and you've stood up for Western civilization, Christian civilization. And President Trump invoked the words Christian civilization. We must join together to preserve Christian civilization. During World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill met together in the Atlantic, understanding the evils of National Socialism, and they talked about the defense of Western Christian civilization. And so the important point here is what people in many cases don't recognize in our crazy pigmentation politics, melanin Marxism, identity politics. It's an all-out assault on God Almighty in the United States. Our nation, remember we say a one nation under God. If we forget that, and we're forgetting that, just like they did in the Soviet Union back in the day, Solzhenitsyn reminded us that, and Dostoevsky predicted that. And this is exactly what's happening, and it's not a coincidence that Antifa and Black Lives Matter Marxists are very much anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, anti-Judeo-Christian Western civilization.
But those were the basis of the America as a state. Those are the basis of a global position of America. When we talk about the presence of the United States in Europe during the First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, those values that Ronald Reagan was talking about all over his both presidencies, those were the values related to good and evil, good against evil. So what are the reasons for American voters to decide opposite in the last elections?
Well, back in the 60s, a very radical left-wing member of the Students for a Democratic Society, which was Marxist, who then became a professor at Columbia, said, we lost the politics. What he meant was Ronald Reagan became the governor of California. They called him a fascist back then. Richard Nixon became president of the United States. He says we lost the politics, but he said something very profound. He said, we won the textbooks. We won the textbooks, thus we won the classrooms. So those radicals of the 60s, those Marxist radicals who were declaring revolution in the streets, they put on ties and they became professors of Marxism at Brandeis, Berkeley, Madison, University of California, Berkeley, Madison, Columbia, etc. And they disseminated this very anti-American, anti-God philosophy, which now is in the streets of America. They're in our corporate boardrooms. The millennials today have bought hook, line, and sinker that Marxism/socialism is something to be admired, when we know, to quote Ronald Reagan, it is evil. It was an evil empire then, and they're desiring to create an evil empire now. It's not a coincidence Pope Ratzinger actually wrote the book on Western culture a few years back, and he was attacked when he said, be aware of the fact that there's evil in the world that wants to eradicate Western culture. And this is exactly what's happening. Pope John Paul II warned us. People like myself, I've been warning us for 20, 30 years, and now it's not only in the classroom, it's in the culture, it's in the churches, and it's soon to be in the streets again. Remember, the officer that was involved in the Derek Chauvin case, right, in May, the trial is coming up in Minneapolis. You can't get anyone to actually go on the jury because the assumption in America is you're automatically considered to be guilty with no due process. Law in America is dying. If you destroy Western Christian civilization, you've destroyed natural law, the law of Augustine and Aquinas, the law that Clarence Thomas, the great Supreme Court justice, was destroyed by Joe Biden in 1991, and they just canceled his documentary called Created Equal because it talks about a law above man's law. And so what's underpinning this is a pernicious war to eradicate the beautiful values and principles of Western Christian civilization, and it started in the classroom.
You are mentioning the whole Western civilization, which I generally agree with you, because the problem that we see from this side of the Atlantic Ocean is that when America decides to quit its role in the world that we see after the Second World War and after the Cold War, it seems that the evil empire of China, Russia, some other dangerous rogue states, as we call it, may try to challenge the geopolitical position of the United States right now, which can be dangerous for countries and for nations like Poland, like other nations around the world that were witnessing the evil history of the Marxism in general. What's your take on this?
Look, Michael, you pegged it exactly. You and I both know there is a pernicious globalism that is spreading around the world. And geopolitically speaking, look what's happening in the United States right now as we speak. From Brownsville, Texas, all the way to Nogales, Arizona, to San Diego, California, there are literally thousands of illegal aliens coming into the country. The Biden administration denies it's a crisis. There's an obvious crisis, even when Democratic mayors of Del Rio and Democratic congressmen are begging the president to do something. But I would argue that citizenship in America is dying. No longer do we teach American civics, American history, Western civilization, Christian civilization. It is a secularism and an atheism that is actually strangling the very foundation of the greatness of America. And that is why the communist Chinese and Putin in Russia and the others, they're laughing at what's happening. They can see the handwriting on the wall. Taiwan is nervous. Hong Kongers are begging for our help. The Uyghurs in China. The persecution, religious persecution in China is exploding at genocidal levels. And yet the Biden administration looks the other way. They're looking the other way on our border, and they're looking the other way geopolitically in Europe. You, Poland, stood with us. That's why we love your people so much, your government so much. President Trump understood that. That's why they had to destroy him. That's why they had to get rid of him.
Doctor, thank you very much for your time. Hope that we see each other soon on Rack again. So thank you very much.
I would love to come back.
Hope we see each other. God bless you. Thank you very much for your time. Let's see each other on Rack again. Matthew Tyrmand is not going to be with us this evening. He is landing right now somewhere in Chicago, I believe. So we see him on Tuesday. Till that time, see you and thank you for your presence on Rack On.